Hello, and welcome back to season 2 of our Men Can Stop Rape National Healthy Masculinity Conversation series. My name is Adam Middleton. I'm the digital director at Men Can Stop Rape, or Mixer, and this series is our online platform for creative dialogues about the work we do. Today, we are so excited to present a special edition where we're sitting down with members of our youth development programs, the Men of Strength and Women Inspiring Strength and Empowerment Clubs. If you watched our last conversation, which is available to stream along with all of our other episodes on YouTube, you'll know that we had a riveting discussion with two of our Most and Wise alum about primary prevention and what they've learned in the clubs. So that's why today we're so excited to be going right back to the source and sitting down with a panel of current members of the Most and Wise clubs. So today we are checking in a conversation with young leaders about where they are right now and how we as adults can support them. I'll get us started by thanking you for tuning in and for helping us kick off the season of giving, the most wonderful time of the year. For more information about how we're honoring this season, visit mixer.org, that's mcsr.org, for a host of ideas for how to give and give back, both to our organization and to your community, your family, and those around you. Now let's get started and jump into today's conversation. At Men Can Stop Rape, we really believe that with empathy, encouragement, and guidance, young people can build the resilience necessary to overcome challenges that they face today and any that may come tomorrow. It's exactly why we're back in person leading our Most and Wise clubs in our hometown, Washington, D.C. And to tell us more about exactly how that's going, please welcome Ada, Annie, Elijah, and Joshua to today's panel to answer just a couple of questions and have a conversation about, we're checking in. How's it going? So let me get started with one of you, and then I'll ask you to popcorn to the next person. And to get us started, Annie, how's it going?
It's going really well. But one of the things that's been throwing me off is that we've had 3 of our day 1 classes and only 1 of our day 2 classes. So there are certain teachers that I'm seeing like 3 times this week that I didn't quite expect. But also, it hasn't been all bad since in my humanities class, we just finished our unit. So our teacher, he hasn't made us do anything all week. So I've been learning how to play Clue, and that's been a lot of fun. So I've been really good. And all popcorn to Elijah.
Yeah, I am doing really well today. I don't really have anything like of super importance to report. I mean, I've just been spending today applying for colleges and making sure all of my essays are in, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm pretty much good for today. I will popcorn to Ada.
Hi, my name is Ada. In terms of how I'm doing currently, I'm doing well, actually, not relatively well. I'm doing well. I'm in a different house, so that's new. School is, I like having the day off as much as anyone else, but I still have a lot of work to do, so it doesn't really feel like a day off. But yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm happy, and I'm doing well in school, so I'm pretty A-okay all across the board. I'm gonna popcorn to the last person, who is Josh.
My name's Joshua. I'm pretty good all around. Life's starting to speed up, and I want to slow it down because I feel like a lot of management things are starting to come into play, and I have a lot more responsibilities, and I feel like that's understandable, and I would like to appreciate the moment a little bit more. And I feel like everything's at bliss right now. Grade's good, life's good, but I feel like everything's A-okay.
I won't ask a leading question, but I want to go a click deeper and say, you're back in school now. You've been back in school for about 2 months. The last day of instruction back in life as we knew it was March 2020. So a lot has happened, a lot has changed personally, professionally, academically, I'm sure. And I'm curious to whoever wants to take the question, really, in the time since the start of the pandemic, now that you're back in school and have a bit more of an in-person routine, have you seen a shift in yourself with like how you approach life and just, I think, how you view the world?
I was currently thinking about this question today, but I felt like I found myself, or I learned more about my inner qualities and how independent I am and how to interact with people. And I feel like quarantine gave me the ability and time to think and to understand that it takes it takes time to do anything. And when you take quality time to do it properly, it'll have a great outcome if you do it well and apply yourself the way you would like to. Um, but it's kind of difficult to understand how to deal with the issues of problems and things of that nature without having. Imagine if I didn't have Most Club. That's what I'm really thinking. Like if I didn't have Most Club to be able to interact or have someone to lean on, or have an environment where you can discuss things that are having issues that you're having issues about, or because I feel like since it's so many people and it's such a close knit community, you can have a conversation about anything. And that's what is so astonishing to me, how you can be so close to strangers or people that you didn't think you would be this close to, or have that bond with someone else.
I feel like, okay, I went on I'm going to say, involuntary personal journey during the pandemic. And that's to say, I was pretty secure in, if not the person I was, the qualities I had. Like I knew what I had and I didn't have. And I felt like the pandemic and that just being alone by yourself and the events that came with it really unlocked a different part of me that was always there, but I wasn't really aware of. And it changed the way I interacted with people. And I found out so much about myself so that now that we're back, it's like, I'm different now. Like during the pandemic, I missed school so much. And I still like school, but now I've realized when I missed school during the pandemic, it was because I missed like people. Like I missed being around people. Now that I'm in school and I'm really like around people, I'm noticing that I I'm an extrovert and I do like being around people, but I think I've come to know that I'm a little mean to people I don't know, if that makes sense. Like I'm not actively trying to be that way, but I am and it comes off that way and I learned that about myself. And I feel like that is an example of how I learned different things about myself. And you learn this about yourself because you're alone. Because I feel like when you're with people, you're allowed to bounce who you are off of those people. And it like reflects in different ways and hits different people. But when it's just you, it's like it just reflects back to you. And you're sitting there with yourself, like, oh, wow, this is how we are. And this is what we're doing. And I feel like that triggered a newfound patience within me. And now that I'm back in school, it's really like I am a different person. And it's difficult because no one else has had this experience. So it's like you form a certain sense of independence because there's nobody really to lean on in the form of adults. It's just you and the people who have gone through this. So it's like, oh, well, I have to be the figure for me. And I feel like that's an interesting dynamic to experience and an interesting experience just to have in general.
Before the pandemic, like I'm someone who is extroverted, and I also have a twin sister, and so I was never really alone ever. And I think I was able to get a lot better at being by myself, which is one of the things I think I wasn't very good at before, since I was always just spending time with people. I was like, what do I do if I'm alone? Like, how am I supposed to spend the time? Like, what if it's just me and it's awkward? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? But I started going on more walks and just like doing things with myself and for myself. And I think I found that I actually like being alone more than I thought I would. So even though like we're back in school now and I get to see my friends all the time, I'm more okay with like walking home without my headphones and stuff like that, where it's like it's okay to be alone with my own thoughts sometimes.
For me, I want to say that the pandemic definitely gave me an opportunity to stop and think about myself for a minute, because before the pandemic, it was really rigorous. It was like there was so much going on. And I think it's a lot going on now, but because I had that opportunity to think back on how I interact with people and how I interact with myself, how I interact with my family, my friends, and so on, now there's a definite shift between who I am now and who I was. I know, especially like musically, because I'm a musician. Musically, things have shifted. I had more time before to practice. I had more time uh, to be able to put down my ideas and write music, and now I'm able to kind of do the same thing with just life in general. Um, I'm able to like assess or analyze certain situations better, and I can interact better with the people who I don't know. And it's also giving me somehow, even though we weren't in person, it's actually giving me the confidence to talk to other people. I guess it's because I've been given this opportunity to kind of a redo, because it's like a second first day, because it was like, there's the first day of high school, but then there's the first day of each year in high school. But for this, because we had a pandemic, this is the first day back in high school for a year and a half. So this gave me, it's pretty much like a reset button and saying like, hey man, you got to do this a little bit differently. And so now um I take advantage of the opportunities I have to interact with more people. uh and like everybody else said, I'm an extrovert as well. I like being around people. I don't like being alone. uh I find myself being okay when I'm alone, but I would rather be around people. I would prefer to be around groups of my friends or even people I don't know, so that I can, make friends with them. So yeah, there were a lot of things that changed. I can go on and on for how, like, with how much stuff changed, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff.
It sounds like a lot of self-reflection that had a few different results. I hear more patience, more intention, more appreciation for quality time with the self. I want to ask, a similar question, but it gets a little bit more at not only how you feel that you've maybe shifted, but as you navigate back into more in-person activities, school, but also maybe you're seeing more family members or friends, or we're back in stores and just back in social settings with more people as the pandemic, goes further and further into rear view. I'm curious if you all have any particular notice of shifts of interaction, either between you and your peers, or actually, would you say that there have been any shifts in interaction between you and adults?
I feel like with experiences, I've the experience of being alone, it's taught me the ability to listen. I've became a better listener because I didn't talk as much because I used to talk a lot, and now that I was able to be by myself and be quiet, it gave me the self reflection to help me grow as a listener, if that makes sense. And the interaction between me and adults, I my respect grew for them because of me valuing what they're saying even more, because I listened to more specifically to what they're saying, because I realized that experiences that they've been through, they don't waste their breath to explain it back to me. And people don't like wasting any breath, and the wisdom that they're shedding onto the younger generations and things of that nature helped me understand that that was very intentional, and they want to help the youth or someone under them. So I respect people that speak to me, especially if they're older and they are trying to give me some type of knowledge to make me better. And it helps me understand that as I grow and as I learn my true self and how to fit into the world, or find where do I initially stand or want to be, or what I want to become, help me understand that as a whole, I have to listen.
In terms of interactions with other people and how I see other people interacting and what that means for me, one of the first things I learned when interacting with other people, specifically friends, is that you can't expect you from others, which is to say, the kind of person you are and how giving you are doesn't necessarily reflect in other people. And some people are they're gonna act up, and you just have to live with that because that's the kind of person they are. But I feel like the pandemic and the repercussions of the pandemic have shown me another meaning to that phrase, which is people display friendship, companionship, relationship with respect, however you want to phrase it. However, whatever emotion you can display to a person, you can you'll be hard pressed to find five or more people that it display it the exact same way. And I feel like with me, I'm very open with that expression and I'll say it and I'll show it and I'll do it. I'll like write it on the wall, make a poster, all that. But other people, it's more discreet. And that's not to say that they don't respect you or care about you or listen to you or don't like you. That's just to say, oh, I'm not the same kind of person you are. And that plays back into the patience I had to learn because it was like, okay, they're not ignoring me, they're just busy, or they're not disrespectful, they just didn't hear that. And it's like, I had to draw the line between accepting that everyone isn't me and that they will act how they act and that what they mean isn't going to be interpreted by me correctly 100% of the time because I'm not them. And then also learning, okay, yes, I get that you're different from me, but that was disrespectful regardless of who you are. So it was like a line that I had to learn for myself. And now that I have learned that, I noticed that most people that like display, I'm just gonna say affection because this general terms is starting to confuse me. The way people display affection, if it's similar, those people tend to group around each other. And I find that very interesting because I'm like finding new friends and talking to new people and I'm seeing that like, hey, I'm your friend, but that's your friend group. And your friend group displays affection in a very interesting way. And I think it's odd how you guys found each other and how I think it's really interesting how that plays into one another. I'll be talking to someone and they'll be in a friend group, but the way they display their affection wasn't the same as the groups. So they'll feel disconnected. And I think it's just really interesting to look around and see how each person is really different and unique and how the pandemic and being alone, they got to cultivate that sense of uniqueness. And now that we're out, it's like, oh, wow, you really are different from me. Like in every way, you're really different from me and you're different from him and you're different from her. And you have to respect that differentness. And that was something that I noticed and I found really interesting.
When it comes to my interaction with my peers and my family and adults, they all changed from the pandemic. Especially, I think the one thing that changed about my interaction with grown-ups is actually not even really, it doesn't really stem out of the pandemic, but just the fact of what I have to do now compared to what I had to do before the pandemic. Because before the pandemic, I was a sophomore, so there were people under me and there were people over me. Or when it comes to like there were freshmen and then there were juniors and seniors. And now that I'm a senior, I have a greater respect for what grown-ups do, what adults do, because of the fact that I have to watch over these umpteen thousand other kids who are under me. And so I have a greater respect for them. And I also have a greater respect for those under me because I've been there before. I've gone through freshman year, I've gone through sophomore year, and I've gone through junior year, even though that was virtual, it still has the same I don't want to say vibe because that's a very casual word, but that's kind of the word that comes to mind. And so I have a greater respect for what adults do, um, just in like overall. And so when I interact with grown-ups, I have a bit of respect for what they do. And I, not that I did before, because I've always just been very respectful towards everybody, because I feel like that's like the key to having a great relationship is being respectful to anybody, even if they irritate you, even if they don't irritate you, you have to be respectful regardless. Um, and yeah, just like I have a greater respect for adults, and also when it comes to having respect for my peers, uh, I feel like that has grown because of the fact that we all went through the pandemic together, especially those of us who were in the same friend groups and also in the same class together. And since we all went through that pandemic, we all went through virtual school and social distancing and all that. I have a greater respect for my friends, and even for those of like those people who I'm not even that close to, I have a greater respect for them. And so I interact with a greater respect. And I cherish I cherish the positive things that happen in school now, and I cherish the not so positive things that happen in school, because that's all a part of growth and how we progress. And it just goes to show that, I mean, we just got through we're not fully through it, but we just got through like the bulk of a pandemic. So what can't we do now? Like there's so much more that we can do. And so I like to, take everybody on that journey. I like to go with my friends and family, and um I guess supervisors, my teachers, everybody else on that journey throughout, beyond the pandemic and through life in general.
I'd say one of the biggest way that my relationships with people changed is that I started driving during the pandemic. And even though I wasn't able to interact with like actual people, there's a lot of humanity on the streets. And so you're able to see just like a lot of different ways people are. And I found that super interesting, especially the way that like some people, you're like, oh, we're all heading to the same place. And yet you want to go 50 and a 30. And you're like, and yet we still get stuck at the same light. So maybe faster isn't always better. Or there are people who make a left on a red light. And you're like, what? That came out of nowhere. And yet it happened. And so then like you deal with it and you're like kind of recover from the shock a little bit. And you're like, okay, now I know when this happens again, I'll be like a little more ready. And just general stuff like that. And I started like being able to drive my friends, and I thought that was something interesting, and just how many like layers of stuff can happen. And the bigger thing though was just starting rather than assuming everyone was like out to get me when I was out on the road, being like they're trying their best. Maybe they're not the best driver in the world. Maybe they shouldn't have cut me off like that, but that's okay. And sorry for my labradoodle, she's very vocal. And but just kind of being like, maybe it's okay that they did that, and I can move on a little better, and I can just kind of reorient myself a little more, and just learning to be more patient with people, I think, is the bigger thing.
If your lab wants to join the panel, they are more than welcome to do so. I have to say that. But no worries about that. So what I'm hearing, though, in all of your responses is some degree of personal development and discovery, and some changes in the way that you interact with others based on the way that the world is turned, but also a lot of shifts that are interpersonal, but that are really related to just the way that things have shifted externally. I've heard changes in the way that we interact with adults. I've heard moving to a new house, which is very much a shift. I've heard someone who started driving. I've heard going from a lower classman to an upperclassman and having different respect. So there are all these transitions that are taking place as you all are, moving through life and grappling with the pandemic. I have to ask, because I'm speaking on behalf of Men Can Stop Rape, I want to ask about the clubs. And as you all think about these shifts, A, how is it that your time in the club, you think, informed or been a part of the way that you've been able to adjust and just take everything in? And as you've all entered a new semester of school, what's been most fulfilling about another year, the start of another year of the clubs?
For me, okay, so first part of your question, the Wise Club is really fun for me. It's always been fun for me. I absolutely love Wise Club. And part of that is I am good at talking. I can talk in the morning, I will talk at night. So Wise was always something I looked forward to. And when I started virtual school, ooh, I hated virtual school. I hated every minute of it. Like I said, I'm an extrovert. So it was like, I'm not around any people. It was not fun at all. So for me to go to Wise, it was very fun. It was like a nice little treat at the end of the day. I really enjoyed that. And it was with people I knew. And like Josh said, it's such a close community and a close knit community for you to have like those people to go to after a tiring day of a school that you hate is really fun and good for you. It was good for me mentally, and it also helped like kind of counteract that loneliness. Like, yeah, I was alone. I'll be on the phone later, so that was good. Um, but now with the new semester, a new kind of school, this is I'm now back in school. I have Wise back the normal way. And I feel like the way it's changed for me has opened up it's opened up a new role for me in a new capacity that I have to fill because my Wise Club when I joined, I was in the 10th grade and everybody else was in the 11th grade. And there was like one ninth grader, but she never came. And now I'm in the 12th grade and everyone from my club is gone. So it's like, whoa, this is like, I'm the senior now. Like I have to step up and I have to step in. And this is the first time I've ever been in that capacity because I've always been a very vocal member in the club, but I've never been the member in the club, if that makes sense. So it was like, wow, this is something I have to do. But my new role and the like new responsibilities that come with it haven't changed how I felt about the club. I always feel it's been like a very open space, a very safe space for me to exist as a person. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I feel like there's a certain way you can exist as a person in different situations, especially for me personally as a Black woman. So there are certain levels of my existence that I can turn on in different spaces. And Wise Club is a space full of people who look like me. So there's no reason for me to be like, oh, let me turn this down, or oh, let me not say that, or oh, let me look a certain way so that I don't come off this kind of way. It's all people like me. So it's like, oh, I get to be truly myself. I get to be completely authentic. And I feel like that's really refreshing. And it's something that all people of all kinds need in that space. And that's good for me.
You mentioned that your Wise Club, even though you were a 10th grader, now you're a senior, you referred to it as a close community. Even though so many of the peers that are in the clubs are different, would you say that the vibe and the community of the club is the same, or how has it changed, if at all?
Okay. So the community is still the same. I feel like community is a closeness. And I feel like the closeness will always be there because that's like what you know going into it. Like as soon as you see the flyer, it's like, oh, we're gonna be friends. Like that's a thing that you know as soon as you go in. But the vibe I feel like is different, which is not to say that it's bad. I think this is a new vibe, and I think I really like this one because I feel like you can't recreate a vibe unless you have the same kind of people and the same people. And it's not only that all of the people who are in my club are gone, I'm also a different person. So it cannot possibly be the same vibe. But I feel like this vibe, it's growing because there's some like I last time I was in school, I was a 10th grader. So only people I know are the 11th graders. So there are some 10th and ninth graders who I've never seen in my entire life. So it's like coming into that and knowing them and getting to know them. And I want to be what my seniors were to me. So I'm trying to extend to them and become that kind of person. So the vibe hasn't fully formed yet. It's not grown and into itself yet. But I feel I see where it's going and I see what it is now, what it's trying to be, and I really do enjoy it. And I think that this will be fun, and I hope that I can be what my upperclassmen were to me to these underclassmen.
A lot of nodding. Who else has that resonated for and why?
Definitely me.
Same here.
Yeah, I want to say like the being like the transition between being a sophomore in school and then being a junior virtually and then being a senior back in school and then having these younglings as crazy as they get coming in, and now you have to like Ada said that there's a different vibe to it, but there's still the same community, I guess, in a way. Like especially for Most Club virtually, it was very fulfilling. It was actually one of my only escapes from the negative parts of being in the pandemic, like being alone. The good thing was that I always had Most Club to look forward to on Wednesdays, um, because I didn't really I lived in a different place than my friends did during the pandemic. I was in a completely different city as my school, so like I had no one to really hang out with. Like when there was the opportunity to uh, to come back in person, well, not in person, but to socially distance with somebody, like a friend of mine. I didn't have that opportunity because I lived in a different place, and the place that I lived, I didn't know anybody um, that was my age at least. And so having Most Club definitely provided that opportunity to at least interact with people my age and people who I knew from before the pandemic. Because, at school, especially because it was virtual, there was no true way to interact other than asking about the project that was due on Friday or asking about what Mr. So and so taught in class because I missed it because I fell asleep or I got up like I woke up late or something like that. So other than that, there was no true interaction with my friends. And so Most Club I definitely was looking forward to. I would even make it like kind of a big event. I would walk up to the school down the street from where I was living, and I would just kind of hang out there while I was on the phone. That way I could still get out of the house. Everybody was trapped in the house for a year and a half, and so I had to get out. There was no way I could stay in the house for that time. So Most Club definitely helped me get through that. And like back to being a senior, it kind of branches right back to my other point about having a better respect for what the adults did, because now I'm having to kind of watch over these little kids who are coming up, um, and I have to be there, pretty much mentor them. There's no, they don't have anybody above them other than us who they can at least easily respect, because if they don't respect the adults, then who else can they go to? They would have to go to us. And so having to deal with them and having Most Club is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's helpful. It was definitely, just that experience going through all of that was definitely something that was helpful. There's no other word I can really come up with.
I agree with most of the things he's saying, but I felt like as a senior coming back, you had to move differently or interact differently. And I felt like I now interact with a sense of maturity, because when you were an underclassman and the time that you spent by yourself helped your maturity grow from within. So I feel like I give off a more self-centered understanding of my environment. if that makes sense. And I was trying to say, like, now that I'm an upperclassman, I realized that I give a lot of advice to the underclassmen, and I was really shaking my head when he said something about mentoring, because I kind of peer mentor everywhere I can. I try to give as much advice to the underclassmen as I can about a class, how to interact with a certain group of people, or how to interact with certain people for it to be a benefit to them. And like, I used to play basketball every day before quarantine. And when I had to stop playing basketball, it felt like something was just missing in my life, because I used that. I was always outside and I was always having fun playing basketball. And when that was taken away from me, it's like I didn't have anything to do. I didn't know what to do. And I felt like it helped me attach myself more, helped me interact and attach myself to most club. Like, it really helped me understand the importance they gave, the importance of the community they added and to me, and the value they served in my circle, if that makes sense. And I felt like the community's vibe had changed, because initially everyone was just comfortable. Now it feels like everyone's walking on eggshells, socially distancing. They don't want to be as interactive, or they trying to over interact because they had a deficit of it. And the underclassmen, when I think about it, they never been in a school building. They never was inside of the ninth and 10th grader were never inside of a high school building, for real, for real. So they're new. They're coming from middle school. It's a whole change of environment. And I'm still trying to introduce them into the fact that this is high school, and your life after this is changing forever. And you are growing, and your maturity and things will change. And all of those things started happening to me over quarantine. But by me doing it by myself, it taught me some more patience from within. And they still have to learn that. And I try to give them that insight without doing it for them. And it's very difficult to explain that to somebody that hasn't taken the time to do it yet. So with that, I feel like that's really what it came to.
So the way my school's WISE meeting, well, okay, so the way that our lunches work is that we have 2 lunch periods, and once a week there's 1 lunch period, and everybody all gets to have lunch together. And so that's when our WISE meetings are, and that's how it was before the pandemic. But then during the pandemic, since on Wednesdays we didn't have school, we met on Tuesday mornings, and it was at 8:30. And I was like, this is an ungodly hour to be doing this. Even though before that's like when I was in school, but I was like, no, nothing should ever happen before 9 o'clock. But I went, and now this year we're back doing our lunch meeting. And I think there's like a greater appreciation of everybody who's there, because we've kind of like returned to like a sacrifice of our like shared lunch to like be with each other and kind of open up more and share more. And I also think that helps us to grow closer, because there's this understanding among all of us that like even though like there are 1,000 other things we could be doing, we chose to be here, and we chose to have these conversations with each other, and we chose to get to know each other a little more. So I think even though there was something to be said for those Tuesday mornings, I really do like our lunch meetings, because when everybody's there that they're there for a reason, and they're there to participate, and they're there because they love it. And I think that was like one of my favorite things about coming back.
I have to ask this one question about the club specifically, because it sounds like they are very rich experiences, things that you all have enjoyed both in person and virtually. And so one of our favorite things about the conversation series, and I'm sure is popular in the Most and Wise clubs, is the way that we can take current events, and based on the curriculum, what you learn, rethink and reframe certain things. And so, I'm curious for someone who's like, what goes on inside those clubs? Yeah, it sounds like they're a good time, and the young people really value it. But what are they really doing in there? So I have to ask, what's something that you've seen in the news recently, or that you've just seen in the news period, like a popular hot topic or a current event that you say you can view differently, based on what you've learned in your club?
Something that changed my outlook on life is in most club we were discussing an athlete who had an athlete's career changed because of a decision that they made. And it was very interesting to understand that there's people all there were people in his environment that he could have depended on or could have helped him that could have prevented him from going to prison because I think Henry Ruggs or it's we were speaking about Deshaun Watson or Jackson. I can't remember his name, but that's something in the news that was previously in the news that we were discussing, and we were like, those examples or instances that happen in society help us understand that every moment, every decision can't be taken for granted. And everything that you do is very important. Even if you feel like it's something that's very minor or small to you, everything that you do has some type of importance and it has some type of consequence that is long lasting. And we were basically discussing the values that decision making or time management or interactions play in your everyday life that can last past just a moment. And you feel like you might be having fun one day, but that fun can turn into a lifelong decision. So I feel like that's something that I view differently is our perception of taking things at a different importance, our perception of looking at things with more importance, taking it more seriously.
We were talking about these things flow into each other, I promise. We were talking about women in music. And I remember because I brought up this conversation. I was talking about how a woman in a field and not in music have to do a lot of things to be considered a good artist. And they were like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? And I was like, well, specifically, rappers who are women, they have to do a lot of like their videos have to look a certain way. They have to pick an aesthetic. They have to look a certain way, dress a certain way. And once you make that decision, how you are viewed change. Like you're put into a category. And we were talking about that back and forth, back and forth. And then that led into the boxes that women are put under and like the stereotypes that you're forced into, regardless of whether or not that's your decision. And that really changed how I viewed movies, specifically movies containing Black women, because that's who we were talking about. So it was like, oh, is this a well-written character, or is this just the constant stereotype of a Black woman being successful, and she's about her work and she has all this business and she's like the CEO of her own company, but because of this, she can't keep a man. And what is this trying to say to you? What is this trying to communicate? What's the point of this? Because it keeps happening and it's weird. And it's like, okay, I get that that's part of her character arc or whatever, but at a certain point, it starts to overshine her other quality traits. So that makes it seem like you're trying to put out a message. And that was really interesting. So we started we started trying to identify the tropes that you'll see Black women in media and like what they'll be and what role they'll play. And we came to the conclusion that like it's almost always like a tale of like she did something, so this is what she gets. And it's almost never something that deserves the punishment. Like it's almost always, oh well, she had a baby when she was young. Young is always like 23. Well, that's why now no one loves her, or she decided to get a career over having a child at a younger age. Well, now she can't keep a man, or she decided to leave her husband who was cheating on her and not stick by him. Well, now she's infertile. And it was like, why is she being punished constantly? It was like this weird cycle that we noticed. And now whenever I look at a movie and I watch a movie and like there's a character who's Black and them being Black is part of their character traits, it's like, are you a character or are you a trope? Like, are you something unique that's been brought to the table, or are you a lesson that someone behind you is trying to push? And I felt like Wise Club really heightened the way I look at my movies and I analyze my movies and I enjoy my movies and just shows and stuff like that. And I think that's really interesting. And I'm grateful for the different perspectives that they brought me.
We've reached our final question. We, as you know, we're calling this checking in. You know, the name of today's episode is Checking In. And so now we're going to check out. So I want just final thoughts from each of you, and as something that might be able to be a conversation starter or something you can think about as you give your final thoughts is, we title this conversation checking in, you know, where our young leaders are right now and what they want from the adults around them. And so I'm curious, with all that we've talked about, with all that you've experienced since March of 2020, what is it that from your perspective, adults still don't get about what it's like to be a young person grappling with all that's on your mind and all that's on your plate? Or, you know, maybe you've been pleasantly surprised with the level of engagement, interaction, and relationships you've built with adults. And so what is it that you've learned most?
I think that although I have a lot of respect for at least the people, the adults in my school and the adults that I'm around, I think overall there is a slight disconnect, or maybe even a greater disconnect that I'm actually, you know, seeing from my perspective. There's a disconnect between generations when it comes to, I guess, mental health, or just anything having to do with emotions or feelings that teenagers go through. Because yes, we are still developing. Yes, we are children or somewhat children. Yes, we are under 18, but we're still human beings. And so we can still experience the same emotions that a grown-up may have, you know. So certain things like depression and anxiety, those aren't something that you can play with or that you can just scoot under the rug or sweep under the rug. Like if you're like, for those who are parents or at least guardians of a teenager or even a younger child, if they say something about their mental health and they're you know, comfortable enough to open up to you about that, I feel that it is very important to at least look into it, instead of saying, oh no, you'll be fine, walk it off, or saying, you know, you don't understand what you're talking about because you're a child. Because the thing is, children are smarter than most people think. Teenagers are smarter than most people think, because of the fact that we're sponges. So we're bringing everything in from so many different angles and from so many different experiences, because we go to school with so many people who have different lives and everything like that. And so we, especially because we're also growing up in this time, we have a little bit more experience of how things work now than how they have worked in the past. So like when it, more specifically with mental health, you know, like if somebody says they're having trouble, you know, waking up in the morning, or they're having trouble staying happy, make it your mission to at least check in on that person, regardless of whether or not you believe them. I don't really, because believing isn't really where like the bulk of it is. I think it's just the action taken. Because like I feel like you don't really have to believe the person, but if you at least make the effort to help that person out, then maybe there will be some kind of progress made in that person's life, regardless of what it is. So just like help that person out, like whether you believe them or not, whether your belief is that children don't know what they're talking about, or you're still in development. Regardless, help that person, especially if they have made themselves comfortable enough to come to you with that issue. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I think something that really needs to be understood is that this was a pandemic, and this is something that has not been experienced by you. Like, we all experienced the pandemic, and it was sucky for everyone. But a lot of things, okay, let me frame it like this. A lot of things that happen, parents can shield their children. Like, oh, if there's something bad going on in the news, we can just shut it off. Or if something bad's going on in the neighborhood, you can't go outside today. Something's bad going on in school, we switch schools. Something like that. Like, there's always been a way that you can put up a shield, or at least stand in front of your kid and stop that from happening to them. This was not that. This was a bad thing that affected everyone. It got everyone. Like, it didn't matter what you did, where you moved your kid to. This was a bad thing that affected you. So I think it really doesn't take you understanding that a child went through a pandemic, but it really takes a bit of self-reflection and going like, oh, what happened to me during this pandemic? And I feel like the immediate step a lot of adults take when they're talking to a child is, oh, well, what was I doing when I was that age? When that's not really a fair perspective. Like, when you were my age, you weren't on school online, and you did not see your friends for months at a time. And this was not something that happened to you. You didn't watch a whole bunch of people lose their common decency. Like, humanity really showed what it was, and certain factions of certain people really like erupted into showing what they believed and how strongly they believed that. And I feel like this is something, that eruption in beliefs and that eruption in voices, along with the solitude of it all, is something, a certain combination that only our generation has experienced. While in school, that's something that our generation has only experienced. So I feel like when adults go, well, when I was 16, that's not really a fair comparison, because I just wish they would go, well, how was I feeling when I was in the pandemic? And how does that relate to you? Instead of thinking about when they were 16 and how it relates to you. Like, I feel like that's a weird way to, I feel like I'm not being clear, but also that's the only way I can explain it. Because like Elijah said, I am a person and you are a person. So what affected you as a person also affected me as a person. It doesn't matter where I'm from or where you're from or what time it is or where we were sleeping. What affected you as a person, as a human being, the deepest level, that's something that can affect you, also affected me in that level. And me being a child didn't shield me from that this time, like things. I'm not saying precautions weren't taken to make sure I was safe, but in terms of the mental weight of it all and the feelings you experience and the things you have to do in order to just keep yourself safe, because death was like a really real possibility. Like it wasn't just scary for adults. Like you were gonna lose a family member or like someone, and it didn't. You were gonna lose a family member, and you didn't get to choose who. So it was like, wow, what's going on? When am I gonna see them? Are they okay? And you didn't have that support group. So it's like you had that, and I also had that. Like we were both there. We both had that experience. So for you to try to talk to me in a way, when they try to talk to you in relation to their childhood instead of in relation to their pandemic experience, it feels belittling because it feels like you think I'm a child, and I am indeed a child, but your childhood and my childhood are very different things. So for you to come, it's condescending. And for me personally, I don't know if anyone else's experiences, it's, I don't want to say upsetting because it doesn't affect me that much, but it's like you didn't we didn't go through the same things. Like we went through the same things 2 years ago, but we didn't go through the same my 16-year-old experience and your 16-year-old experience. Two very different experiences. So for you to come to me like we've had the same level of hardship is very upsetting, and it's I don't like it. And I feel like you really just have to look within yourself and accept that we were in a kind of situation that is horrifying and horrible for one's mental health, and go, oh, okay, I need to talk to them like that. Like I need to talk to them the way I needed to be talked to 2 years ago, not the way I needed to be talked to when I was 16. And I feel like that's something that comes with self-reflection, and is it just a, well, they don't understand how I feel kind of thing. So that's really just my thought.
One thing that those really didn't understand about us is that we aren't comparable. And when it comes to the sense of how, relating back to what Ada said, you can't compare or be like, do this way, because we went through a pandemic in the middle of high school where this should be the time where we should be learning ourselves, going through experiences, having fun, having interactions that help groom us into who we become. But we missed a year and a half of that in that time frame where for our class or our generation, we missed that experience. And the severity of, you don't know how healthy someone else is if they were to get it, or to how your mental health mattered, how much your mental health mattered in that environment or that change in atmosphere. And they don't understand, like, we have social media, and social media gives us a different outlook and view on different things. We are able to see people across the world impacted by COVID, or people that are having no sense in the world caring about COVID. And it's two different level of playing fields to have that ability to see those things and not be doing anything in that to help the situation. I wish that, like, if we were to take like a survey or uh um take a survey or get feedback from everyone's COVID experience, I promise that a lot of people would be stuck on the fact that they did a lot more self-reflection. And I feel like that's probably the best thing that came from it, is everyone took time to themselves, and the distance caused people to be more self-centered. I feel like the community as a whole of like the world, people need to start sharing more and communicating better. That's one thing I feel like is different between our generations. I feel like adults and us don't communicate as good as we should. We don't talk as much. I feel like we be so stuck. Our generation is so stuck in social media that we don't take the time to open our mouths and have a conversation. That's how I would like to engulf the question. We feel like the communication between adults and the youth or teenagers really changed our outlook.
Like kind of building off of Joshua just a little bit. I think there is, at least for me, like an understanding between the adults in my life and me that like social media is something that I can avoid. And I don't feel like that's really true anymore. And I think maybe when it was just like a MySpace account or something, then it was like, okay, fine. Like you don't have the computer at your house and it's like not as feasible to do all the things. But like everybody has like some kind of way of interacting with someone else and like on like so many different platforms that I think it's more important to talk about like the usage of it than the avoidance of it. And like not like classic like, oh, don't cyberbully people, because I also think too when like once you hit an age like in high school you're like, I know how to bully people, I know how not to do that. And so to reduce it down to that is kind of unhelpful. But to be like, here's how you take time away. Like, here's how you approach that. Here's how you decide that you want to get rid of this account or add a new one. And like, you kind of be like, here's how you decide that like maybe following them isn't good for me anymore. Like, I thought it was, but it's not. So I should not do that. And so, but being more conscious of how you do something rather than avoidance, because yeah, avoidance just isn't a good answer.
Well, I want to give a big thank you to today's panelists and, of course, to you all for tuning in. We are so grateful that we get to engage with our young people from this perspective and in this way. Wise Singer once said, "I believe children are our future." And while these are young adults, barely children, they are certainly the future with their input. And we're just lucky to engage with them in the clubs and in settings like this. That will do it for today's conversation until our next episode of the conversation series. To be the first to find out when more conversations are coming, you can visit mixer.org/signup. That's mcsr.org/SIGNUP. Please follow us on social media at Men Can Stop Rape on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we will see you next time. Take care.